let's pivot over to our next session. I had the privilege of meeting our next speaker virtually last summer as one of the organizers of the Forward CloudSec conference, which, by the way, I don't know if we've officially announced this, at least at this event, but that is happening virtually and live September 13th and 14th. And I'm sure everyone would like to know that the call for papers is open. So if you're sitting on some awesome research or something that you think would be fun to present, definitely do take a look at that one. Our speaker is a security architect inside the trenches, inside of the AWS cloud. I'm very excited to hear the session coming up on incident response. So let's welcome Anna McAbee. And Anna, I'll pass it over to you. It's all yours.
Yes, thank you so much. I want to start by, saying thank you to, everyone at SANS, everyone from, Eric to I think like Corrigan, Jennifer, Frank. There's so many others that I'm sure are part of this event. So I just want to say, thank you so much for helping out with this. So today I'm excited to talk to you guys about incident response on AWS. So hopefully to help everyone understand incident response and how that actually kind of relates to Amazon Web Services and what I do. So like Eric said earlier, so I am a security specialist solutions architect at AWS. So I specifically focus on threat detection and incident response. Before this, I worked as an AWS customer. So I did kind of red team and blue team roles before this to kind of secure the cloud. Before that, I studied computer science in college, so I was more of a programmer at heart. But so today I'm going to go through, just kind of an overview of incident response. What actually is different on AWS and in a cloud environment, the services that we have. And then kind of revisit the incident response lifecycle from like a lens of AWS, and then operationalizing and scaling incident response on AWS. So I will say that I probably have too many slides, but hopefully I get through them all. So getting started, with incident response, what it is. So it's really a combination of people, process, and technology. So this hopefully is not, new news to you all. But from a people perspective, these are your, incident responders, your threat intelligence folks, and your process. This is your actual plan, your run books, your playbooks. Whichever terminology you'd like to use, and then technology. This is your SIM and other detection mechanisms. So from a lifecycle perspective, I chose to go with the NIST lifecycle, but there are many others that you could go through, and they essentially break them up into different steps. But for the sake of this, I did choose the NIST lifecycle. From a preparation perspective, I think this is your most important step. So this is where you establish your team, a plan, and a strategy, and this is also where you should have your proper access. And the right hardware, essentially like, creating those kind of stepping stones for the next few phases. And then detection and analysis. So with detection, this is where you're, identifying a potential incident. This could be from various sources, whether it's an actual log, or it's a human kind of calling somebody and saying, hey, my computer is acting strange. That is actually more common than you think. And then analysis is where you're determining if an incident is actually an incident, and then the actual scope of it. So containment. Containment, this is where you're kind of isolating and limiting the scope of it as much as possible. So this could mean literally just taking the system offline, so unplugging it That's probably the most simple form of containment. And then eradication. So this is, removing the threat and also kind of improving your defenses. So for example, installing your patches or something along those lines. And then recovery, bringing, those systems back into production. And then lastly, so post-incident activity. So this is something I'm going to kind of revisit later, but it's generally like it doesn't change within the cloud. So kind of completing those documentation and making sure you have complete answers to the who, what, where, why, how, and having your lessons learned meeting. It doesn't really change within the cloud. So what exactly is different about incident response at AWS? So this is something I wanted to cover is, the shared responsibility model. So I think most people on the call are pretty familiar with this. So AWS is responsible for security of the cloud. So this will be, protecting the infrastructure that runs all of the services offered by AWS. And then the customer is responsible for security in the cloud, which kind of means, these will be determined by, the cloud services that the customer selects. So generally, I typically say if like you're configuring it, like you should, provide kind of like, I guess, thoughtful configuration into how it works. In general, like we will, support you guys as much as possible, but the scope of this talk is really around security, of the customer's perspective. So incident response in the cloud. So I think the major difference of like incident response traditionally and now is the service plane. So this didn't exist before. And I think before it's like, you always thought of like a compromised like server or a compromised laptop or something like that. But the service plane is really the new incident response piece that's new to our customers. So incident response within the service plane, they affect the customer's AWS account, their permissions, billing, all of that. So this is really a paradigm shift. And I would say it does take kind of a purposeful approach to learn and understand, what does that mean? And understanding, like what does it mean for my business? I think it does take multiple people to kind of learn, what the service plane is and things like that. So, but yeah, I will also say that, it's much more scalable. You can, use APIs and many other things in order to, better scale your response. So what's the same? I would say, it's definitely, I'm still really trying to emphasize, like, you need to have great processes in place. You still need to have like subject matter expertise. So like you need to have people who know your infrastructure. That tribal knowledge is still critical to your business. That hasn't changed within the cloud. So you still need to, monitor your alerts, monitor your logs, all of that is still the same. So AWS services for incident response. So this is my AWS service that I like the most. CloudTrail. So if you think of AWS, it's actually maybe a simplified model is it's a bunch of APIs. If you have a service like CloudTrail, which actually logs all of the API calls, that would be critical for your incident response plan. So these are, all of your API calls. So this will give you, the who, when, where, what questions. They're all logged within CloudTrail. So I can actually show you an example. So here's an example for someone, stopping an EC2 instance, for example. So you can see there's a who, in this case, it's an IAM user called Alice. When they did it, what they did, which is stop EC2 instances, the AWS region, and the actual resources affected. So CloudWatch. So CloudWatch is often confused with CloudTrail because they do have, I guess, similar names. But CloudWatch serves as a log target, an aggregation point for AWS logs, as well as, application and, operating system logs. So it is primarily used for performance, but it does have, security implications as well. So config. Config tracks, resource configuration changes over time. So if somebody has, an S3 bucket, that's, made public or something along those lines, you can look back at the configuration of that S3 bucket and, actually see what occurred. So config, there's also rules and there's much more to it. But from an incident response perspective, you can also look back and you can see kind of the configuration of resources over time. So VPC flow logs. So these are my screen. Okay, never mind. My screen did go black for a little bit. So these are your kind of like network flow logs, for example. So if you're familiar with like NetFlow, these will show, this IP address is connecting to this IP address over this port. And then, you can actually see those connections over time. So here's actually what it looks like within the CloudWatch console. So you can see, the account ID. I did black these out just so you guys don't know. I don't know. But yeah, so the source IP address, the destination, and you can see actually kind of what's happening over time. GuardDuty. So I think if I only had like two things that everybody could do, it'd be like CloudTrail, like collecting CloudTrail, and the second one would be GuardDuty. So this is our threat detection service. It does, continuously monitor your environment for you, and so it, identifies threats so that you don't have to, create these kind of custom rules. So the data sources I mentioned, so VPC flow logs, which I just went through, and then CloudTrail, these are things that GuardDuty automatically ingests, but you don't have to enable those to use GuardDuty. So these are, the kind of two parts of the threat detection engine that GuardDuty uses. So it's threat intelligence and anomaly detection. So here are a few like examples. So with threat intelligence, looking at Bitcoin mining, for example, kind of going through and looking at, we see within VPC flow logs, we see an IP address we know is associated with Bitcoin mining. That will be an easy flag. Anomaly detection is a little bit, I guess, more, I don't want to say complicated, but it's it does have more of a baseline. So this will be things like if a user never looks at IAM, for example, but they suddenly are trying to enumerate IAM permissions, that would fire an alert. So all these findings, they are they do get, certain levels of criticality. So there's high, medium, low. And so you can send them in different places. So a lot of our customers do, end up sending them to CloudWatch and then to their SIMs. But a lot of others also do send to Security Hub. And so that's something I do want to go through next. With GuardDuty, here are just kind of a few examples of like the kind of finding types that we have. So cryptocurrency, for example, that is probably top of mind for a lot of people. Pen test finding type. So Kali Linux, for example, space using that within your AWS environment, that'll be an easy, alert for your security operations. So to kind of go ahead, I guess with Security Hub, so GuardDuty can feed into a service called Security Hub. So this ingests, various AWS security services, as you can see here. So GuardDuty, there's also, Macy and a number of others. In addition to, the findings it ingests, it has, out of the box security checks. So these are more preventative controls rather than detective controls. So from there, you can, take actions, based on, what you would like to do. But yeah, so I would say altogether, Security Hub, provides you, that single pane of glass to ingest various security tools, AWS or not, to understand, your security posture. This is kind of like what we see a lot of our customers do is, having this kind of finding ingestion posture into Security Hub. So essentially, like you can have all these number of AWS services that you can ingest, but we also have a number of like third-party partners, so like CrowdStrike, Palo Alto, many of others that you can also ingest within Security Hub. Within my own AWS environment, you can also have like open source partners. So I use like Cloud Custodian within my own like AWS environment. So that's definitely an option for everyone to do. And then from there, there's also these security checks. And so these are more things like, is your S3 bucket public? Things like that are also available to you. And then detective. So detective can, kind of take these findings that you have within Security Hub or GuardDuty and kind of, help you analyze the situation. So similarly to GuardDuty, it automatically ingests data and it, it analyzes it for you so that you can kind of, do kind of get rid of the heavy lifting that you don't have to do. So it allows you to, get to the root cause and, understand the scope of the incident quicker. So these are kind of the three main use cases we see from customers around detective. But I will say that it's kind of expanding, and I think that the first one is triaging security findings. So, taking those GuardDuty findings. So say, for example, something happened around, like a Bitcoin mining. Going through it would provide you those graphs to understand like what actually is occurring from a network perspective. And then incident investigation. So kind of going through and, triaging those use cases. And then lastly, threat hunting. So this is the original kind of part of detective. To identify things like, IAM roles with abnormal activity and things like that. So, so to kind of revisit, the incident response lifecycle that I had gone back to before my slides messed up earlier. So I think something I think is super, super important is, preparing. So, training your security operations staff on AWS. So, making sure they understand your infrastructure and actually not just AWS, but like the AWS services that you use. And in the same sense, creating that same plan, running drills, and automating where possible. And then from there, building your AWS accounts with security operations and log archive, which is something we see a lot of our customers do. Sometimes we do see like a forensics account. Just depends on kind of where the customer is in the journey. And then creating kind of read-only and break glass rules for access to AWS accounts. So a lot of our like kind of day-to-day staff, they'll use more like read-only rules. So from a detection perspective, I talked a good amount earlier around CloudTrail. So setting up that CloudTrail organizational trail across your organization. When I say organization, I mean AWS organization. So that would be something that's important. And then GuardDuty, Security Hub, those should be as a delegated administrator within your security operations account. And then, monitoring that for findings would be a great starting point. And so say within those, accounts, you get a GuardDuty finding, the next best step is, creating CloudTrail logs. It could be within Amazon Athena or within your SIM. So some customers don't have SIMs. So I think it's, important to kind of, think like, how do you typically create logs? So you can always ingest CloudTrail in a number of ways, whether it's your Athena or your SIM. And we also have Amazon Detective to also help with that. So containment, I would say this is really where there is kind of a lot of variety. So from a containment perspective, you can kind of disable and rotate IAM credentials, isolate an EC2, and like create a backup of an EC2. But I would say that depending on the incident that you're kind of brought forward, it's not always like a one size fits all. It really just depends on your threat model and things like that. So, and from an eradication perspective, I would say, kind of going through with systems manager and running those, patching your systems and running commands. Kind of same thing with that, with, kind of going through your threat model and your plans and your run books. So this would be one thing that I said earlier, that it doesn't change within incident response. So this would be, you still have to complete documentation, and maybe it's not the most exciting thing in the world, but you still have to do the same thing. And then lessons learned. So you still have to have, those same meetings. So operationalizing and scaling incident response. So I know I don't have a ton of time. I'm looking at the clock right now, but so I will say I do think it's important to automate where you can. So we do see a lot of our customers leveraging CloudWatch and Lambda in order to automate response. So this could help them, gain kind of contextual like information that they couldn't have before in such a quick fashion. So you have to kind of think about your organization and think, what information do we need right now? So with Playbooks. So Playbooks is kind of similar. Definitely recommend from like a people, process, and technology perspective. I think this is a huge gap with kind of providing that, kind of technical guidance for your security operations center in order to, understand, what is actually happening. So you don't want to like just have like a crypto miner, for example, in your environment, and you just terminate it. Like that doesn't do anything. You don't understand like the root cause. So actually going through and having that prescriptive guidance to understand, like, here's what actually happened and here's why it happened. So yes. So yes, that's all I have. I know I did go through a lot of slides and it did jump around. So apologies on that.
Yeah, no worries. I love the walkthrough from end to end there. I think there's obviously so many different services and so many different configuration options to work with inside of the AWS ecosystem. And for folks that are trying to figure out what that journey looks like, it can be challenging and very overwhelming to go through that. One of your slides that jumped out at me was, with kind of tabletop exercises and simulations and things like that, which I think is a great idea, to practice walking through that prior to actually needing it, in a real life scenario. Do you have any suggestions or resources that you know about that can help folks maybe practice that or get started with any of those simulations?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I would say, I think in general, I'm a big fan of the what is it, the Cloud Security Alliance. They have that like the penetration testing playbook, or you could kind of go through and you can actually do a threat model of your environment. So I would encourage everybody to kind of go through and think about, what is the threats in my environment, and then from there you could actually do those simulations to say, hey, I think ransomware is a threat to my environment. Like, what are we going to do if that actually happens? So I would encourage, I guess, everyone to kind of go through those. I don't want to say nightmare scenarios, but kind of think of like what your business is faced with.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. That's a great resource. We'll maybe dig the link up and drop that into the Slack workspace for folks that aren't familiar with it. Michael asked over in the Zoom chat, kind of just comparing, here's how we used to do it on-prem versus, the cloud native option, and just out of curiosity, and wanted to know, do you see, if you're in AWS, let's just say only, right, single cloud, do you think most folks just enable, GuardDuty and CloudTrail and a lot of the services that we walked through and use that as their single threat detection capability? Or do you think people are still in, more of a hybrid model where they're maybe moving data on-prem from AWS and kind of aggregating it and keeping some of their more traditional network security appliances and whatnot?
Yeah. So I would say I do see, I know this is maybe not the answer you're looking for, but I do see a good variety of like all-in customers. So I come from financial services, and we were all in and within AWS, but there are customers who are more kind of 50-50. But I think the future is that we're 100. A lot of our customers will go 100% in. So I think from a logging perspective and like a threat detection perspective, we have found like a lot of success through CloudTrail, GuardDuty, especially GuardDuty, because it's so low cost and like really high value. But we just kind of need more customers to kind of, I guess, kind of be on page with that. Not, I don't want to be on page with that, but understand that, if they're half and half, like it still is worth their time.
Yeah, GuardDuty, I mean, personally, if I've got to pick a couple of services to enable, you nailed CloudTrail and GuardDuty right out of the gate in that presentation, saying to turn those on. And I take comfort that those rules are continuously being kind of evaluated, and obviously new detectors are being added in there. And there's a lot of great features inside of those services. Luke put an interesting question out there, in a cross cloud compromise scenario. So Luke, I'm assuming you're maybe referring, are you talking about cross cloud, like cross AWS accounts, or maybe even going a little bit bigger where maybe it's kind of a multi-cloud compromise, pivoting from AWS like into Azure AD or something like that? Do you see a lot of use of open source and or other third-party tools to help that multi-cloud scenario?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So I just typically help with the AWS. So I'm not sure I'm the best, person of contact for, cross cloud information, but I will say I think we do have the tools and we have the resources to help with, AWS security. So.
Excellent. Yeah, and one thing I know, Tony De La Fuente, the author of Prowler, he's a big Security Hub fan just because of the open security findings format and the ability to take some of those external tools and kind of import those into Security Hub through the REST API. So there's definitely capabilities inside of there that we've used, just to put our own findings in that dashboard and things. Just scanning through the list here, I think we've got most of the Q&A covered. Anna, thank you so much for dropping in and walking us through that presentation. Great work, taking us through a very complex ecosystem. Apologies for some of the PowerPoint demons that surfaced during there. Hopefully we made it through okay, though, with Zoom being interesting. So
yeah,
we'll take the discussion. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say thank you all.
Yeah, very welcome.